All right, let's break all of this down with Alexis Hoag. She's an assistant professor of law at Brooklyn Law School. She's joining us from New York. Thanks for your time with us on Al Jazeera. So the punishment fell short of the 30 years that was requested by the prosecution, but it is the longest sentence that a police officer has ever received in Minnesota. So is it a fair sentence? Do you think it fits the crime?
Hi, Doreen. Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be with you. This is a difficult matter to discuss, whether a sentence is just and deserving. I think it's uniquely American for this country to want retribution and a lengthy sentence. 22 and a half years is a long sentence. I wouldn't necessarily call for a lengthy sentence. I would rather look to something that would offer repair and some sort of relief to the family. I would also ask for a reality in which Black people are not killed by law enforcement officials. And even though Derek Chauvin did receive a conviction and a sentence, which again is very rare, as you opened the segment with, what I would rather see is a situation in which the presumption of criminality and dangerousness is not assigned to Black people, and so that we don't have lethal contact to begin with when law enforcement officials encounter Black and brown people in this country. So I have mixed emotions about the sentence, but I do hope that it brought some amount of relief to George Floyd's family, his loved ones, and the community right there in Minneapolis.
Right, and in that, in the sentencing, and in fact, in that memo that the judge put out, he said this, that Chauvin abused his position of trust and authority, and that Mr. Chauvin treated George Floyd with particular cruelty. I mean, how much weight do you think those words carry?
I think they carry great weight, and that's why we had this 10-year departure upward from the presumptive 12-and-a-half-year sentence. So Judge Cahill would not have gotten there without those two aggravating circumstances. And we heard at the close of the trial in April that there were 4 aggravating circumstances that the state put forward. So in addition to those two, the cruelty and the abuse of position of authority, we also had 2 other aggravating circumstances, that there were children present in the crime and that the crime involved at least 3 other people, which were the 3 other former law enforcement officials. So we would not have had this upward departure without those 2 aggravating circumstances. So Judge Cahill really did rely on those when coming up with the 22-and-a-half-year sentence.
Does this case set an important precedent for the country? And what message do you think it sends to police officers who perhaps are thinking of abusing their power?
You know, I think that particular aggravating circumstance, that this was abuse of power, abuse of a position of authority, does send a message to law enforcement officials, particularly those acting within Minnesota. This is all under state law, and so the laws vary from state to state, but I think it does send a clear message within this individual state. However, the narrative that was really advanced by the Minneapolis Police Department is that Derek Chauvin was one bad apple, and that their training, their preparation, and law enforcement officials don't act like that. Derek Chauvin was an exception, and I really caution our viewers to really hold weight in that, because Derek Chauvin was acting within the framework of a police officer. He was a supervising officer within that department. He had, I think, approximately 19 other incidents of misconduct, and yet he was still elevated into this position of authority. And that was, again, within the Minneapolis Police Department. So he was not one single exceptional bad apple.
Right.
He was an officer.
Right.
19-year veteran.
Yeah, so, and you said a little while ago that this sentencing, in fact, doesn't do anything to change the underlying concerns, as you put them, with the presumption of criminality and dangerousness that police assign to Black people. So what needs to happen for that to change?
I think that is beginning to happen within this last year. There has been increased awareness in all sectors and segments of society that racism exists, that white supremacy exists in this country, and it's something that we all need to grapple with. And so what is happening, it's the very beginning of it, is a racial reckoning. I wish I could say that the entire nation is engaged in this, but we do already experience this conservative backlash against talking about racism, against talking about critical race theory. But the needle is moving slightly forward in this arena, and I really do point to George Floyd's murder in May 2020 as setting off this very pressing, necessary discussion in this country. That would change the underlying presumption of criminality and dangerousness that society assigns to Black people.
Alexis Hoag, we thank you so much for speaking to us from New York.
Thank you.